Good morning and welcome to Kitty Talks. We share inspirational life stories that empower you to create yours. And today I have with me a very special guest all the way from Thailand, the social media angel herself, Katie. Hello.
Hi.
All the way from Koh Phangan in Thailand. Fantastic.
Yes,
fantastic.
indeed.
For those of you that don't know the social media angel, as I like to call her, Katie is a social media marketing consultant, I would say, who works with Hay House authors and has had her own business for the last 10 years. And she's very much a voice of authority, I would say, in the personal development industry in her space. So I really wanted her to come today and share her life story with Kitty Talks listeners to see how she transitioned from her corporate life into what she's doing now. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, it's been quite a ride up until this point. But I am very fortunate in that I love the work that I do. And I get to do the work that I love on a daily basis with people that I love. So I say that I'm very lucky and fortunate, but I've made my own luck and fortune in that as well.
Yeah, and what I love about what you're doing now is you've created, not only you're doing what you love, but you've created this amazing lifestyle where you're traveling around the world doing what you love. So for people listening, do you mind explaining a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing in the world, really?
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to kind of give a full background on how I've come to where I've come to?
Well, I think if it's okay initially, if you tell our listeners what you're doing now, and then what we'll do is we'll go back to sort of see how you've
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, so I am the social media angel, and I work with authors, experts in the mind, body, spirit world. I have clients in America, in Australia, in England and Europe, so right across the world. And I've been doing that on my own as a consultant now since 2014. So I switched my business model from I had an agency and I decided to go solo as a consultant in 2014. And I have equally in that, I used to help people run their social media platforms. I was actually doing it for people. And I would say in the last 18 months, as I've traveled more and wanted to make that switch to a more traveling lifestyle, I've moved much more into consultancy and coaching so that I'm not dependent on actually doing it for people. I can just help people do it themselves. So that's allowed another layer of freedom to allow for the traveling, because I found when I was traveling and having to like do it for people, that was like quite time sensitive sometimes. Yeah. And so being in different time zones, that wasn't working for me in quite the same way.
Wonderful. Yes. And so you now spend how much time in Thailand on a yearly basis?
Well, I've been here I've been here for 4 months. So I live very much in flow. So I follow my soul voice, not just around my business, but also about where I'm meant to be. So I spent 3 months in Bali at the start of the year. Then I came back to England. I was speaking at the Mind, Body, Spirit Festival in London. And I had a couple of other kind of speaking gigs and engagements and workshops back in the UK. So I came back and spent the summer. Actually, I was down on the South Coast for a little while. And then I came out here, and I've been out here for 4 months. And then I'll come back again to England in the new year. And then I'll decide where I want to go next.
Beautiful. And that's exactly what we want to do through these interviews, is inspire people to live in a new paradigm way, and you said you live in flow, and that's exactly how one of the ways I describe, living in the new paradigm.
Yes. And it's taken me a while to both give myself permission to do that, give the people around me in my life, give me permission to do that. Because it's amazing actually when you start to step out of that box of, even when I had my agency and I'd set up my own business and I would go into the office every morning and I'd be there and And I was like, okay, I'm running my own business, but I'm still like in this box where I have to be in the office from this time to this time. So then I went solo as a consultant. And one of the big reasons for choosing to go solo as a consultant was because I didn't want to be sat at a desk in the same place every day, every week. I was just like, okay, so next, but then I found I was sat at my desk in my house every day, every week.
You swap it.
It was just like, okay, yeah, what's the next? Okay, like, how can I keep pushing this boundary? But when I started to do that, like I came away for a month and I came back to England. I came back to England for like 3 months, and then I went again for a month. And then I came back, and each time everyone was like, oh, you're going away again? You're doing that again? And it's probably taken me until this trip to like get my clients, my family, my friends, like cool with the fact that I will go away for a couple of months at a time, because I was doing something that was considered quite different. And it's been quite interesting to witness their resistance. And then I felt like I was like almost like apologizing for living my life in a way that I wanted to fit, which was quite interesting.
And there's so much conditioning that we are fighting with, I think, on a daily basis when we do transition and when we do change our lives to live more in flow. But I still have it where, I might be doing this and I'm like, oh, I'm not working. And it's like, well, hold on, you are working, but we're so conditioned to kind of 9 to 5 work. If we're not sat in front of a desk or computer, then we're not working,
Yeah, massively. And I felt like I was, particularly in maybe the first, so I've been doing this traveling now for 2 years. It took me a year from winding up my agency to transition to start to travel. And like I said, it was little bits at a time. And now I'm doing longer stretches. But I found I was almost, like apologizing, or I'll be back then. And what I've realized is mobile technology, like my mobile phone is my office. Yeah. I could be sat by the pool and I can be doing emails, or I can be in a cafe and I can be writing, my book, or I can be somewhere else and I can be down to the beach and I could record 5 or 6 videos, which I can then use for my social media channel. So it's like, you don't have to be tied to a location to be working. I could be taking a walk and I could be figuring out a strategy for one of my clients. And it's actually probably when I'm taking the walk in the beautiful place that the best ideas are dropping in, because I'm relaxed and I'm in flow. So actually my creative ideas are stronger and they would be if I was like,
And there's space in your life for them to come through, isn't there? I think sometimes when we're on that kind of corporate 9 to 5, it's just a rat race. We're just in kind of survival mode. Especially in the winter, it's dark. You go to work, it's dark. You come home, it's dark. You might even pop out for a sandwich and you get a tiny bit of daylight. But take us back, because obviously a lot of people listening to this podcast are probably where you were maybe 10 years ago. And one of the things by sharing your life story, what was did you have an epiphany, or what was your transition? You mentioned you obviously have always been in this field, and you mentioned you ran a larger agency. Tell me a bit more.
Well, I actually had a small boutique agency, but how it was, I worked in the music industry, and I had always followed my passions. I was very fortunate in that I was doing some temping in my early 20s, and I landed a temp job covering the phones for Dave Pearce, the Radio 1 DJ. So I was thrown in at the kind of deep end in some ways. And so I I worked in his office, and then I moved to his management company. And it was through working in his management company that I started then representing quite a lot of other DJs. And one of my DJs had just lost their show on Kiss FM.
Yeah.
And I'd heard of these things called a podcast. So I was like, why don't we do a podcast, put it out on MySpace, and still provide for your audience that were there, from the radio station. So I could keep them booking into clubs in Clubland, because we needed to show that they were still popular in order for them to get fees to play in the clubs. So, and it would help me get them back on the radio. So I kind of came up with this strategy, and we ended up winning a Sony Radio Academy Award for Best Internet Program the first year that they did them in 2007.
Wow.
So Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd always followed my passion in my job. Like, I was always passionate about music. I was passionate about the music industry. I'd made sure I was in the right places to pick up potential jobs that would feed me in my soul and creatively as well. But when we won the Sony Award, and I was 28, and I'd probably say that I was a little bit as well, like I lacked a little bit of caution, maybe, like I do lack a little bit of caution in my personality trait. And I had a lot of contacts out in Ibiza, and I decided that I wanted to continue making podcasts. Like, I just won this Gold Radio Academy Award. So I quit my job and I went off to Ibiza, and I knew that I had contacts. So it's like relationships. Like, don't make these jumps unless you know you've kind of got relationships in certain places. Like, I knew I had relationships in place in Ibiza through my work. And I was now feeling really passionate about making podcasts. I was like the podcast queen.
In your highest excitement.
My Sony Award. And I went to a friend of mine who was a radio producer who used to run the Mambo studios in Ibiza, and said, how about we team up and we approach the clubs to see if they want podcast making. So my two passions at that time were clubbing and podcasting and DJs. So it was like, so again, it was like listening and what am I really passionate about? Okay, like how can I make a living from doing that? So we literally went round all the clubs and we pitched this podcast idea to, I think, all the major nightclubs, and one of them said yes. And so we didn't get paid a huge amount for it, but we would go to the club every Sunday. We'd interview the DJs. I'd get some vox pops from the punters and record a bit of the atmosphere. And we'd have it online by the time everyone was leaving the club at 6 o'clock that next morning. And it went to number 1 on iTunes. So, you know, it was just like...
everyone desperate for more.
Win under...
Coming out of the clubs, they were still desperate for the more and reliving their night before. So it went straight to number 1.
But that's exactly it. Yeah, they're wanting to relive the night before. They want to go and put the set on that they've just been dancing to, you know, that next day when they're maybe chilling out by the pool or whatever. So it was like, how can we, you know, again, it's kind of like thinking about how people are and what their passions are and how we could, you know, marry the two together. Yeah. And that's why social media works so well for me, Kitty, because it's like, what do people love? What do I love? What does my client love? What does their audience love about them or about what they're doing or about the thing? And it's like, how can we create content and how can we do things that will bring those two together at that passion point? And I think when you're thinking about your work in your life, it's really tuning into that. What lights you up? What makes you feel good? What makes you feel passionate? What makes you want to get out of bed in the morning or go out at night? You know, it's like, what are those things?
I think we totally overcomplicate it, don't we? And I think it's also because it is what lights us up and what has come so naturally to us. I think we confuse it because it's too simple, it's too obvious, it's too easy. And then we lose confidence because it's like, well, no one would want that. But actually, you're right. It's totally that. It's like, what do I get a buzz out of? And what is my highest excitement? And how can I make it work and help other people?
Yeah. And I know I'm making it sound super easy. Like, I went to Ibiza, I got a number 1 on iTunes, I won an award, I did this. Like, I am nothing, you know, like I'm not playing myself down. But at the same time, I was just following my heart. I didn't set out to win an award. I set out to try and create something that the boys loved, that their audience would love. And we happened to win an award. You know, I was then able to go, I love this. And, you know, it's just like, again, it's like following that passion and that love has always then led to a situation that was successful for me.
Brilliant. And so where did you go next? You obviously created this amazing... Did other clubs then want to do it? Like, I would have thought other clubs must have wanted to jump on the bandwagon.
Yes, but after one season in Ibiza, I was done. It was quite
pretty full on, I'd imagine. I've only been to Ibiza once.
Yeah, well, so this is the reality, right? So I wasn't making a lot of money out of that podcast. So in order to be able to pay for my apartment and the car I'd hired and all of those things, what I started to do was I had like 4 jobs. One of them, I was delivering records round for a promotions company back in London. I was dropping off CDs with all of the DJs in the local clubs, like the small clubs in San Antonio. That was earning me a bit every month. I was doing driving for one of the nightclubs. I used to go and pick the DJs up and drop them off to their hotel, take them for dinner and take them back to the airport. So I had like multiple jobs. And then because I was building relationships with the DJs from picking them up from the airport, and they were maybe flying in 3 or 4 times across a season, again, it was like great relationship building. I decided that I had loads of experience with booking DJs into clubs from my previous job working for Dave. So I was just like, I can get you some gigs. So I started like booking DJs into clubs and making money off the back of that. So I was making 15% off every DJ booking that I got for them. So I built myself a little DJ roster. And then on the side of that, I was then creating like more digital content. But yeah, I was done with Ibiza come the October and went back to London and decided to kind of get this agency off the ground that was a mix of kind of social media. Facebook was brand new, 2007. That's when everyone started to join. Twitter was starting to do its thing. YouTube was only a year old. So it was very new at that point. So I started like on the one side, I was, making money from doing the DJ bookings. And then what I was trying to do was going to like the record labels and going, I can help get your stuff seen by more people. Let's work together. And so I was there weren't social media like departments at that point, or even budgets for social media at that point. So it was just kind of trying to educate people and come up with ways to get hired, to come up with kind of content strategies and plans off the back of the success I'd had with We Love Ibiza and with the Firing Squad.
And so what you grew that agency, from memory, you grew it quite large and with quite a few employees.
Yeah, no, I had about 6 or 7 working for me. I was that was for about 5 or 6 years. And for a long time I had the bookings agency for about 3 years, 4 years, and then decided to kind of drop that in favor of doing social media as a whole. And what happened was I got hired to do some stuff in the publishing industry as well as the music industry, and had a really big success with a book called The Poison Diaries for HarperCollins and the Duchess of Northumberland. We grew her an audience of like 150,000 on a Tumblr blog, and it was that. And so that started to then pick me up other work, and so I started to get jobs working with O2 and Penguin and some quite big named like household corporates, so to speak. But it's still, as a small business, overheads, new laptops, training up staff,
mouths to feed, always having the responsibility on your shoulders, always having to win the work, gets quite stressful, gets quite straining.
Yeah.
And is that
and then I was like, why did I set this up? I didn't, there was definitely a little bit of ego involved. Like I loved being like having managing director on my business card at 30 years old and all of that stuff. Like I won't, that was definitely something I've had to kind of chip off the old. But it was just like, I think I realized I was stressed out. Like money wasn't always easy, like having to reinvest in the business, not taking as much myself. You don't get time off. Like having to be a manager of people. I was a bit, I want to be liked like a lot of people do. And so I found that part quite difficult, them wanting to like me and be like this lovely, fun, easygoing boss, and actually be a boss, was difficult for me. And I decided to go on. There's a guy called John Parkin who'd written a book called Fuck It.
Oh yeah, I know.
The Ultimate Spiritual Way. Yeah. And I had started my spiritual journey, and I, got into meditation and learning about how energy works and flows within the body. And him and his wife were running a retreat out in Italy with Qigong and breath work. And I decided to go on one of their retreats. It was like, I either like quit this business or I need to go and like learn how to manage my stress. So I decided to go on one of his retreats, and I noticed he was like really missing a trick with what he was doing on social media. Got an amazing brand.
Wow.
And so I approached them afterwards and was just like, I loved what you're doing. I'd love to get involved. And I think it probably took about a year before he hired me. And again, this was like following my passion. Like I'd started to get more involved in the mind, body, spirit, like on a personal level. So I started going to retreats and weekends. And so when I identified that I thought I could work with John as well, it was like, right, then invest in going to his weekend workshops, invest in going to another of the retreats, like show that you're invested in this. And then they hired me, and he's published with Hay House. And so when I started working with him, I came up with a campaign for his second book, Fuck It Therapy. And that was a success online.
It was, because I'd never heard of him. And I remember it's funny, I didn't realise you were working with him, because suddenly he came out of nowhere and he was everywhere. And that was obviously a lot to do with what you were doing for him.
Yeah.
And just before we move on, because that you just described that place, where you've grown this business and you have this, I remember it because I remember being there as well. And it's like, it's what you thought you wanted. And then suddenly you look around and like every day is kind of increasingly more miserable. And you're kind of like, what have I done? I've almost created myself a little prison and I don't want to be in here. So I suppose what I wanted to do for people listening, because you might find there's somebody in that situation, they're either in a job that they really are not being fulfilled by anymore, or they've grown a business that they're not being fulfilled with anymore. Like, what advice would you have for them? If they're looking to transition, what advice would you have for them?
I mean, Kitty, like I said, I've made it all sound very easy. There was a period where I was really stuck, and it could even have been like 2 years really stuck, definitely a year of being pretty miserable. And I think that I invested in mentors.
Yeah.
I did personal development, which helped me really identify, because I was trapped in a prison. I remember like going and being with friends and being in tears and going, just change it. It's your business. And I'm like, I can't change it. Like, I've got employees and I've got this and I can't, like, there's nothing I can do. And they were like, of course there's something that you can do. So getting really good counsel, I think, is one piece of advice. People that love you, people that you can be really honest with about how you're feeling, and also knowing that, I mean, like, I was definitely felt really trapped, but then it was like something just clicked, and then I made a decision, and I made a very clear decision. And once I'd made that very clear decision, even though that very clear decision was an incredibly hard decision, and that was to wind up the agency, to make everybody redundant, and to see what happened next.
That must have been really hard.
It was awful. It was absolutely hideous. But I did it with heart, and I tried to do it with as much heart as possible, and just be really transparent and really honest with the people that were working with me. They knew I hadn't been happy. I knew half of them weren't that happy. It was like, can we all just get honest? I was like, you actually want to be working for a major record label. You actually want to be doing this next. You actually probably do want to keep working with me. Then work with me in a freelance basis if that's what you want. You wish you were earning 60 grand a year. Like, that's not going to happen here for another 3 or 4 years, if ever. So, actually, maybe this is creating freedom for everybody.
Yeah.
That's how I tried to
That's a brilliant way to look at it, because I think what also happens is we almost unconsciously sabotage. Well, this is what happened in my case. I unconsciously sabotaged what I was doing because I wasn't happy and I didn't really want to be there. So it's almost like that energy that you're pushing out to the universe can be picked up on. Like you said, you could feel it in other people and you could feel it in yourself.
Yeah. But it's hard for people to get honest with themselves around that stuff, because a lot of it comes down to security. A lot of it comes down to fear of the unknown. A lot of it comes down to also confidence. Like, can I make these things that I really want to happen for me? Because I think if everyone had been happy, then the business, we all would have been happy, and I would have been happy, and it would have been working and flowing. And it wasn't. Like, I looked for signs as well. Like, I started to look for signs, like even like small signs, like people paying their invoices late. Like, there'd be periods of the business where that wouldn't happen, and then there'd be periods of the business when that would happen. And I often was like, okay, so there's a kink in our flow here. Like, so it's just like just having like this kind of greater sense of awareness as well, and not looking at just as through my eyes, but also then looking at it from this kind of this wider. And I knew in my heart I wanted to be traveling, really, and I knew it was hard to, I was having to take the same amount of holiday days and do this and do that because I was an employee of my own company. And so like I started to look even at like the language, like limited company. It feels limited. If I'm a sole trader, I'm a sole trader. I was like, okay, well, that's telling me something. But that's me. That's my journey. That's personal to me. That might not be the same for somebody else.
So you made that really difficult decision, and that must have been incredibly hard. And then how did things move? You said obviously you went and did some work for John, and was it from there that you then got into Hay House?
Yes, so that had already started as I had the agency. So I was already kind of playing around with, it wasn't making as much money as the other bigger named brands were bringing in. But it was still a nice trickle of income coming in. So because I'd done well for John, Hay House were recommending me to a lot of their authors. And so I'd started working with Diana Cooper and Kyle Gray, tons of the authors. And I could see that I could personally live off doing that work alone if the agency, the other stuff had wrapped up. So I decided that if I was going to quit the business, I was going to specialize in mind, body, spirit and make that my kind of personal niche. And then there was a very natural, so I didn't go, right, because my agency was called K-Dot. I didn't go, right, K-Dot's over, now Social Media Angel begins. I switched the name of the business from K-Dot Online Limited to K-Dot Online Consultancy and was trading as that. And then the Social Media Angel aspect started to happen quite naturally across the next sort of year. And I just very organically started to migrate to like a new brand.
And this is what I've seen, doing 70 of these interviews now, where I've interviewed people like yourself who are following their passions. It does open up, like when we go towards what our heart is telling us we want to do, like that from there, that one client, John, developed into loads of different clients in an area and a space that you felt really called into. And then, as you said, it's almost like your brand was unveiled to you. Your kind of purpose was unveiled to you the more you went along the right path.
Yeah, so clients started, it was their nickname for me. Oh, you're my social media angel. And I kept hearing it, and I was like,
I like it. Yeah.
Well, so they just became, and that keeps happening naturally. So I went from, I was delivering for people, and then I said there's been like a shift again, even in the last 6 months to a year, of becoming much more of a kind of coach, which suits me. And I think it's almost like a following of the breadcrumbs. I have a certain personality type. I get bored quite easily, so I need a constant flow and a constant change. But I was just doing the same thing in and out, like I would check out and switch off. So, and I'm very, I have chosen an industry which is constantly evolving. Like, Instagram is like, there's 3 new features just in the last week. So, like, I love the fact that I'm kept on my toes within my industry as well. Like Facebook say they're 1% finished. They have a completely iterative strategy. And so I actually feel like my life and my work and everything is 1% finished, and it's an iterative strategy where I'm constantly tweaking and changing and trying this out and playing with that. And that might work for those 6 months, but then something else is going to develop and change, and there'll be a slight twist, which I'll take into the next 6 months.
And I think for people listening, that's a really good example of, taking the leap, going from your head to your heart, following what it is that you want to do, but not putting too much expectation and pressure on yourself, because you're not going to suddenly get this download or flash of inspiration. Well, you might get flashes of inspiration, but you're not going to suddenly know your end goal and why you're here. It's almost like you said, the breadcrumbs is such a great analogy, because it's following the breadcrumbs, following the sign, going towards what it is that you're enjoying, and it evolves. So don't put too much pressure on yourself, and try and enjoy the kind of day-to-day breadcrumb following trail.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's fun too.
Yeah, when you get in that mindset, if I think it's great fun, but I think people get scared of this whole purpose word, passion word, because it's like, well, how do they want all the answers quickly? And I'm afraid that's our soul's journey,
And this is what I say, not just about social media, but I do say it about social media. It is a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Yeah.
You developing your message, the way you show up online, like everyone wants, this great analogy, social media and life, like everyone wants the follower numbers. They like come to me and they're like, right, I want 10,000 followers. It's just like, okay, why do you want 10,000 followers? What's 10,000 followers going to bring you? What's the journey that you need to go on from 1,000 followers to 10,000 followers? And it's actually enjoying the journey of it. And what I tend to find is that when clients get into that enjoying the journey of it, then it starts to happen naturally anyway, because you're not forcing anything. When we're trying to make stuff happen, it gets more of a block to it in that state of trying. And that's proved in energy work. There's a Qigong exercise where if someone's like trying to, they push you and they'll push you straight over if you're trying to kind of force against them. But if you go into completely relaxed body state and then they try and push you, when you're in your center and you're in trust, they can't move you at all. You just won't budge. It's like this strength in your body. And I think it's like that same thing. It's like having that trust that brings a real strength to the work that you're doing, and that allows then things to happen and manifest.
So for someone listening, let's come on to a bit more about social media while we've got an expert here. Let's utilize her. You just mentioned it is a big goal. You're kind of measured by your social media following. I'm really interested in what you said just then about the fact that you coach your clients to lean into it. So for someone listening who's got a little brand, they're starting to follow their purpose, their business is just starting, what advice would you have for them, like you just said, to get this organic following?
I would say develop a consistent social media practice. And that social media practice is showing up in various content forms. So it might be that you want to show up in the written word, video, but it's like you create like a framework. I call it a framework to flow within. And so what you're doing is you're showing up consistently with the thing that you're wanting to build your business around. And what happens is when you show up in that consistent fashion, it's like anything, it's like exercise. When you show up consistently, things over time start to change. You start to get fitter, you start to get stronger. And it's like seeing, I did a talk recently called Yoga Your Social Media. So it's like seeing your Instagram feed as your yoga mat. Like how do you show up on the yoga mat? It's like being a bit flexible, but building that core strength. And a lot of people find that they are quite blocked around speaking and showing up on social media, because you have to be quite vulnerable with showing up with your ideas and with your products or your services. So it's like, how can you show up in a way that feels comfortable to you, but also is then comfortable to your audience? And I find when you find that space, again, it's like that following the breadcrumbs, but through content, things start to happen. So I had a friend of mine that just kind of followed this strategy, and she went from 600 to 10,000 in like 18 months. And she just she just consistently showed up around the things that she was wanting to share with the world, and made that a practice.
Mm. So when you say consistent, what, twice a day, or are you talking Instagram lives, or what?
No, when I say consistent, like, I would say it doesn't even need to be twice a day. It could even be like 3 or 4 times a week tops. But you're consistent in the message. So say, like, I do a social media angel nudge little video. So I am consistent. If I post nothing else in a week, I will post a nudge once a week on my profile. If I've got another client, it's just like, okay, they will blog once a fortnight, but they will extract from that blog and post that in like a few different ways across the fortnight. So people have an opportunity to connect with that content, but the consistency is in the message. The consistency is in the showing up. The problem is when we think we've got to show up twice a day, and we're then showing up, it's like we go into this, oh shit, what am I going to post now mode. And I call that the social media vortex of doom. It's like where we're thinking we've got to, we're not in our joy space. We're not in that. So it's like, be consistent in finding a content type that you want to show up in. Like, I love making my nudges. So I love sharing those with my audience. It also like gives me a hook every week to talk around a topic, should I want to, you know, and my audience know that I'm going to be consistent with that. Same with clients that I work with. They know that they're going to show up consistently. So it also means if you want to take 2 weeks off, you can, because they know that you'll come back. Yeah. And show up consistently again with a message.
No, very good advice. Very good advice. And just a little bit on Instagram before we let you go. So you said three changes this week. Like, Instagram for me is just bamboozling me at the moment. Like, it's changing so much. The algorithms and the engagement seems to have dropped, and all sorts of things going on.
So it's interesting what they're doing. So they're constantly playing with algorithms. This is one of the things, like, Facebook have who own Instagram, personal, subjective, and unique. They're like their core newsfeed values. So when you're making your content and you're thinking about how it engages, the more people engage with your content, the more people are going to see your content. So keeping it personal, subjective, and unique, that's a good way to work with the algorithm. But in terms of new features, what they've just released is a follow hashtag feature. So you can choose to follow a hashtag, and then the top post from that hashtag will show up in your newsfeed, which is quite an interesting one. So getting to know your hashtags and the kind of content that's on hashtags, if you want to be then one of those posts that gets filtered into people's newsfeeds off the back of that hashtag, is something to focus on going into 2018, because that's they've just announced, they've only just brought it in this week.
In your niche, so for example with us, it would be passion or purpose. We could follow that.
Yeah, but what I would do is start to look at, like, thinking about what are the hashtags that people are going to want to follow. And it might be that you want to be quite even like really niche and really look at like communities and spaces that means you're more likely. So you're not, if you're wanting your content to get seen, you're in a space that there's not as much competition. So that you're more likely, you know, it's still a hashtag that, you know, in what you could do, and this is me thinking off the top of my head, is then be like, you know, talk to your audiences and say, follow this hashtag to make sure you see this kind of content from me. So that they're then, because, you know, most people who are on Instagram are aware that they're not necessarily even seeing all the content that they want to see because of the algorithm. So it could be a nice way of helping your audience find your content.
Okay.
It could be, I could say to mine, follow the hashtag social media angel nudge. And that means every time I post a nudge, I know that my nudge will get into my audience's newsfeed who've chosen to follow that. So you could use it in a couple of different ways. The other feature that they've put out is you can highlight a story on your profile. So Instagram stories only last for 24 hours. But if you now choose, there's a thing in the bottom right-hand corner that says highlight. It will then go onto your profile page and it will stay there until and I think you've got 5 slots for your favorite stories to go on your profile.
I saw that on somebody else's profile the other day. It's almost down the bottom, isn't it? And you
yeah, it depends. It's showing underneath the bio.
Yeah.
But then there's also highlights now in the newsfeed. So when you're scrolling the newsfeed, it'll pick the people that you watch the most. It'll put their latest story that you can choose when you're actually scrolling through, which just shows like they see stories as getting more and more popular. And it is, apparently there's already more users on Instagram stories than there are on Snapchat. So it's just getting more and more popular. Yeah.
So take your stories and take the good ones and save them down the bottom. And what is that, for a week, or how long does that last?
I don't know, actually. I haven't, because it's brand new this week. So they haven't said, I don't know whether they're just there indefinitely until you swap it out for another one. And I think there's, like I said, I think there's 5 slots for highlights. So I'm guessing that if you filled all 5, then you've got a new one that you want to do, you choose which one you want to drop.
Fascinating. Yeah, my goodness. It's a full-time job just keeping track of all the changes, really.
Yeah, it is.
But no, Katie, thank you so much for coming, because I know that your transitional story, will really inspire our listeners. They're out there making those changes, and I know that your journey and your story will really inspire them. So I want to thank you for coming on Kitty Talks and sharing your life journey.
My pleasure.
And we will have all the Katie's details in the show notes, so you can find out more about the Social Media Angel, and we'll have all the details so you can follow her. So follow her, follow us, and please, by all means, send us your comments and your likes, and let us know any questions you may have that we can follow up on. But we will, we will see you again next week on Kitty Talks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Kitty Talks. Be sure to head over to our kittytalks.com website and become a member of our exclusive club, and you'll get free interviews and access to our private Facebook group, exclusive webinars and secret success interviews. See you there.